The only car under the flickering sodium lights of Station 7 was my own. I had taken the New Year's Eve shift for the double pay, a decision that now felt like a profound error in judgment. The old highway had been decommissioned years ago, leaving the gas station a lonely relic swallowed by pine forests and silence. Inside, the air smelled of stale coffee and diesel, the heater rattling like a dying animal. A tinny, portable radio counted down the final hours of the year, its cheerful voices a hollow transmission from another world. My duties were mindless rituals to fight the creeping stillness. I wiped the Oradicline counter, rearranged candy bars, and stared at the security monitor. Its 4 screens showed nothing but emptiness: the forecourt, the 2 aisles, the walk-in cooler. The quiet was no longer an absence of sound, but a tangible presence, a thick vacuum that pressed against the windows. At 11:45, the power died. The lights, the radio, the monitor all cut to black, plunging me into a darkness so complete I felt I had ceased to exist. A minute later, the emergency lights thudded on, casting a sickly orange glow that twisted the familiar store into a cave of long, stretching shadows. The cold rushed in immediately, sharp and invasive. That's when I saw the front door was propped open. I was certain I had closed it. A sharp, metallic fear crystallized in my chest. My heart hammered against my ribs as I moved from behind the counter. I needed to lock that door. My shoes squeaked on the linoleum, the sound obscenely loud. In the dark reflection of the soda cooler glass, I saw it. A figure stood behind me, near the cooler door, a man-shaped smudge of deeper shadow. I froze. In the reflection, it turned its head toward me. Don't look, I thought. It's a trick of the light. But the cold was intensifying, radiating from that spot. I forced my own head to turn an inch. The walk-in cooler door was wide open, its interior a pool of absolute black. From within that darkness, to pale, childlike hands gripped the doorframe. They were perfectly still, white-knuckled, braced against some unseen force. This was no trick of the mind. This was a thing that was here. The dread transcended into a cold, surreal clarity. Old Marv hadn't quit. He had fled. The hands began to pull, dragging something unseen from the cooler. I didn't wait to see what this was. I ran, not for the open front door, but for the stockroom in the back. I slammed the door and braced a metal shelf against it, plunging myself into pitch blackness. The only sound was my own ragged breath. Through the stockroom's barred window, I could see a sliver of the forecourt and the broken station clock, its hands frozen at 3:17. Then the banging started on the door. Not frantic, but slow and patient. I watched the clock outside. As the banging continued, the frozen minute hand gave a jerking, grinding twitch, then another. It was moving backward, counting down to a midnight that had already passed. Each thud synchronized with each sickening tick. The realization was a final, lonely sorrow. It wasn't trying to get in. It was telling me time was up. The banging stopped. My lighter, my last source of light, sputtered out of fuel. In the perfect blackness, I heard the stockroom door swing open with a tired creak. The cold that swept over me was the cold of deep earth. Something stood in the doorway, breathing in wet, rattling drafts. I felt a dry, frozen finger trace a line down my cheek knot in menace, but in claim. The new year began in silence, and I had become a permanent part of the quiet. St. Ignatius Hospital hummed with low-level activity, but the old hospice wing on the 3rd floor was a tomb. I was the overnight security, walking the green-lit central corridor under flickering fluorescent tubes. My patrol was a ritual in silence, checking rooms of empty beds stripped to their plastic mattresses. The air clung to the ghosts of antiseptic and decay. A professional detachment kept the unease at bay until the 11 p.m. round. The door to room 312, always shut, stood ajar. Inside, nothing was out of place except a broken window blind and a small pile of dried, brittle flowers on the floor, carnations and baby's breath, brown and forgotten. They hadn't been there an hour ago. The air in the room felt thicker, colder. I left quickly, but as I turned down the hall, a new sound followed me. The sound of a wheelchair wheel, turning. My light revealed the empty corridor. The wheelchair that had been by the nurse's station was gone. The sound came from around the corner. Curiosity, that fatal anchor, pulled me forward. I found the wheelchair parked facing a wall, as if its occupant had rolled there to contemplate the plaster. The vinyl seat was ice-cold and slick, with a strange, oily dampness. No one else had a key to this floor. The elevators were locked. The stairwell alarm was silent. Fear, sharp and bright, flooded me then. I retreated, heading for the central elevator. As I passed the open room doors, I kept my gaze locked ahead. But in my peripheral vision, the empty beds were no longer empty. Each held a silent, sheet-draped form. Don't look, I commanded myself. Looking would make them real. The elevator doors were ahead, the clock above reading 11:58. The call button was dead. Behind me, the squeaking resumed a steady, rolling progression now, coming closer. I ran for the far stairwell, my flashlight beam jittering. The sound kept pace, then gained. A cold draft pushed at my back, smelling of wilted flowers. I crashed through the stairwell door and scrambled, not down, but up, toward the roof. I burst out into the freezing night as distant, silent fireworks began to pop over the city. No relief came, only a hollow, infinite loneliness. I looked back. Nothing had followed. Walking to the roof's edge, I looked down at the hospital lawn. They stood there in the strobing light. Dozens of pale, faint outlines in rows. Faces turned upward, watching the celebration they could no longer join. They had never been chasing me. The wheelchair, the shapes in the beds, it was just the echo of their final collective loneliness, and for a few hours, I had been forced to feel it. The new year meant nothing to them. It was just another moment in their endless, silent watch. And that cold understanding was a ghost they had successfully planted inside me. The Midtown Galleria Mall had been a corpse for 2 years, a 3-story temple of consumerism left to dust. I saw it not as a ruin, but as the ultimate canvas. On New Year's Eve, with a backpack full of spray paint, I slipped inside. The silence was a physical weight, a velvet pressure against the eardrums. My headlamp cut through the gloom, revealing the grand atrium, a dry fountain filled with trash, and the skeletal remains of shuttered stores. The sheer scale of the abandonment was intoxicating. I was a ghost, making my mark in a ghost town. I scouted the second-level concourse, my footsteps echoing and then dying, swallowed by the immense void. In the food court, I found the first wrong thing. A single plastic tray sat on a table, holding a petrified hamburger and fries, a paper cup upright beside it, a museum diorama of decay. It hadn't been there before, and the layer of dust everywhere was undisturbed, save for my own prints. A cold curl of dread tightened in my gut. I left quickly, heading upstairs. On the luxury 3rd floor, the door to a former boutique was open. Inside, the mannequins were not posed elegantly. They were piled in a heap in the center of the room, a tangled nest of slender limbs and featureless faces. It looked deliberate, ritualistic. Retreating to the concourse railing, I looked down. My blood turned to ice. The mannequins were no longer in the pile. They now stood in a perfect, silent circle around the dry fountain on the ground floor. Their heads were all tilted up, aimed directly at me. Impossible. No one could have moved them so fast, unless they moved themselves. Panic severed all thought. I ran for the ground floor and my escape route, a loading dock door on the far side. As I hit the bottom of the frozen escalator, the mall's dead PA system crackled to life with a blast of static. Then a cheerful, automated woman's voice boomed through the emptiness. The time is now, 12 o'clock. Happy New Year. The power was dead. This was a memory, playing itself. The static dissolved into slow, syrupy mall music, and in the dim light, the circle of mannequins began to sway. A slow, stiff, side-to-side motion in time with the musica macabre, silent New Year's ball. It wasn't attacking, it was performing. I was the audience. I edged along the wall, trying to reach the anchor store that led to the dock. My failing headlamp plunged me into the pitch-black expanse of the former department store. Racks of crumbling clothes loomed like skeletal trees. I could still hear the faint music. Then, right beside my ear in the absolute darkness, I heard it. The crisp, delicate snip of fabric scissors. I didn't look. I charged forward, shoving through hanging coats that felt like grasping arms, until I saw the red exit sign. I burst through the door into the freeing cold of the night and didn't stop running. Hours later, in the safety of my apartment, I scrolled through the photos I'd taken when I first entered. There, in the background of a food court shot, was a faint, translucent figure sitting at the set table. It wasn't looking at the food. Its head was turned, looking directly at the lens, directly at me, from the very beginning. It had no face, only an impression of weary expectation. It hadn't been waiting for the new year. It had been waiting for a witness. I had been the guest of honor at its endless, silent party, and I had brought a piece of its watchful loneliness home with me. A specter, now forever trapped in the pixels of my screen.